If you're just tuning in, sometimes people tune in late to the Weather and the Media show. Our guest here is Richard Horodner, veteran storm chaser down from Vero Beach, Florida. Richard, how far of a trip is that? What is that, about a 2-hour drive?
It's 105 miles.
105 miles. So what did you take? How long did it take you to get here?
About 2 hours.
About 2 hours, okay. You just jumped right down I-95 and head on down?
Yep. Surprisingly, there wasn't much traffic through Palm Beach. I thought there would be.
Yep. All right, now, so how old were you when this whole Big Bad Wolf experience?
5 or 6.
5 or 6.
My first actual experience that got me really interested was when I was 13. Miami hadn't had a hurricane since 1950. That's 10 years, and as you know, that's beyond the statistical average. And I developed some interest. I was always into science, and my father bought me...
Aim the mic. There you go.
Sorry. My father bought me the book called Atlantic Hurricanes that was made in...
I love that book.
Gordon Dunn. And
Gordon Dunn, yep. I love that.
And there were some accounts in there of one of Camille and one of Hurricane Janet that hit Swan Island, and one of the Labor Day storm, not Camille, excuse me, that came later. But there was an account of Swan Island where Hurricane Janet hit there. That's the storm that took the only recon plane in history. And then the account of the Labor Day storm that hit the Keys, which is the worst storm that's hit the U.S. in history. And that really excited me reading that. And here it was, a few months later, in the newspaper, there's a story about tropical cyclone forms off of Africa named Donna. And they had no satellite pictures back then. So
right.
The first news story was aircraft taken by surprise and 60 people were killed in an aircraft crash off the Cape Verde Island. So immediately that storm was ominous. And Donna tracked a pure Cape Verde storm, came all the way across and went up to Cat 4 several times. Giant hurricane. It turned due west after just missing the Antilles, went northwest for a while, and then turned due west under a ridge. Moved 8 miles an hour for 3 straight days, just plodded steadily, and the winds were 140 sustained, 150 sustained. The gale winds went out 350 miles to the northeast. It was a giant hurricane. It was headed right towards central Cuba, due west, but the forecaster was saying it might recurve soon. There's a trough in the Gulf, and that might pull it up. And I recall coming home from junior high school the day it was maybe 400 miles away, but already the winds were blowing from the northeast, steady 20 to 30. The sky was as blue as I'd ever seen it. And the 20 to 30 mile an hour wind in South Florida is a rarity unless there's a tropical cyclone nearby. We don't get our mid-latitude storms in South Florida. I remember riding my bike northward into that northeast wind, and it was tough. It was humid, steady wind. I got to the house, and there was my father standing up on a ladder, putting up these 3 big plywood sheets of wood over the plate glass window in the house. And already, the routine was different. I mean, every day you go to school, your father comes home after dinner, and we eat dinner, and all of a sudden the routine was different. There was a buzz at school. There was a hurricane out there. Anyway, he put up these shutters, and I guess you could call this was a calling. That's what I call it. The next morning, there was already hurricane warnings from Key Largo to Key West, and the storm was headed basically due west. It's 10:30 in the morning. Time for lunch. Parents say, go, you take, sister was 17, I was 13, she had the car. Go to Burger King, buy some hamburger. We're too busy doing other stuff to prepare lunch. I wanted to hear this 11 o'clock advisory, but there was a chance they were going to extend those warnings. We get out of the Burger King, it's now 11. I want to hear the advisory. So I go to the phone booth. There were phone booths back then in 1960. And I pick up the phone to call my mom to ask what the advisory said or get the position. I had a map with me. And as I pick up the telephone, the signal from a radio station was being picked up by that receiver in the wires. And the first thing I hear is, hoist hurricane warning from Miami northward to West Palm Beach. I didn't even dial the phone. You know, I got this chill down my spine. Like I said, that was like a calling to me, where there it was. Now I'm going to get to see one of these things.
Now, had you had any experience prior to that, like watching television with hurricanes, seeing them hitting other areas or anything like that, or was this your first experience with a hurricane?
No, most of the footage that existed up until 1960 was some black and white shots of flooding from those 1954 and 55 hurricanes that hit up in the Northeast. Most of them weren't that intense. It was like Irene in a way, most of them.
Right.
There was a lot of damage, a lot of inland flooding, Delaware. One of them was, Hazel had pretty good winds to it. But there wasn't much footage around to see what a hurricane looked like. A lot of still pictures of damage, and a few still shots from Miami from the older storms like King in 50 and the 1938 storm up in Rhode Island.
Well, hold on. When did you move here to Florida?
I hitchhiked down here when I was 6 months old. Actually, my parents moved here, so I'm really.
And you were in the Miami,
Floridian.
In the Miami area?
In the Miami area. So from the time I was 6 months old till 3 years, 5 hurricanes went right over Miami. But I really don't know what
You know, the only reason I'm asking that is my first recollection was, Weaver the Weatherman. I mean, that was my, when you talk about tropical waves coming across the Atlantic, and so before David was coming, that was my first experience with a hurricane, and I remember seeing the tropical waves coming across the Atlantic and took an interest in that and loved the grids and the tracking map and everything. And that got me interested. So I was wondering, in your case, before Donna came along, was there an interest based on what you'd seen on TV with hurricanes and that sort of thing?
Before Weaver, there was Jim Dooley.
Jim Dooley? Okay.
I recall it was only Channel 4 in Miami when I was a kid, one station, CBS. Actually, Bob Weaver took over for Jim Dooley. And the Atlantic keeps your car on the go. I remember when you'd hear the commercial logo come on, run to the TV. And he was a real hurricane nut, and he'd always show you the potential, but it never would come. But, where Miami and South Florida is sitting, they look like they're coming. You can always use like the X-Strap model and bring them into Miami.
Right.
But for 10 years, nothing. So here comes Donna, and it's going to keep going west and go over Cuba. But in this case, it recurved, went through the Keys, Central Keys, and Flamingo, and Naples, Fort Myers, Sarasota.
Now, was the weatherman on TV, Dooley, was he using magic marker and drawing on a board on the screen, or what was he doing there?
I'm going back now. There was a show called The Winky Dink Show, back when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, where you bought this piece of not cellophane, clear plastic you put on your screen, and they would give hints and you would draw lines, but actually Jim Dooley had something like that, where he had something superimposed over the screen where he would draw, like you said, with a magic marker.
Jeez. So you were really excited over Dawn. I mean, you were losing sleep at night, I assume?
I think I did the night before, and I think I was probably up till 3 in the morning. Got to hear that 2 o'clock bulletin,
Yeah.
And when that warning went up, it was just total excitement. Everybody was doing things I'd never seen people doing before. The whole neighborhood, you could hear hammers going and saws going. And it did come in at night. The center of Donna didn't pass over Miami. It passed over the Central Keys.
Right.
Gusts to 180, and we did have gusts to 105. And not having seen anything blowing more than 30 in my whole life, it was very exciting.
Wow.
I remember the first thing that really turned me on, I guess you could say, was when the gust got to like 40, 45, the banana tree in the backyard snapped. It sounded like a giant piece of celery breaking.
Yeah.
And they put those banana trees in these new tract homes because they didn't have hurricanes for so long. They didn't realize that you don't keep banana trees in yards in South Florida for very long.
Yeah, they snap pretty easy. All right, so Donna hit. That was a really large hurricane too. Went up the west coast and then cut across up up to the northeast. Up the eastern seaboard. But that like just about everybody in Florida got affected by that hurricane. It seems like went up to Tampa and the winds switched directions from what I understand, and water got sucked out of Tampa Bay or something during Donna.
Lake Surprise is a lake that's in Key Largo. It's called Lake Surprise because years ago, before they cut an inlet into Card Sound, it was fresh water. You wouldn't think there'd be a freshwater lake in the Keys, so that's why it was called Lake Surprise. But it got blown dry during that hurricane. Now, it's only 5 feet deep, but that lake, that might be what you're referring to. It was totally blown dry. While we're on Donna, I'll tell you about one of the first hurricane chasers I ever heard of. His name was Arthur Pike. He was a researcher at the National Hurricane Center. He wasn't a chaser, and he never talked about it, but other people told me. He chased Hurricane Donna to the Central Keys, and he fell asleep, and he woke up with his bed mattress floating 2 feet from the ceiling. I guess that's why he never talked about it. But when he'd see me and Jim Leonard or a couple of others of us visit the Hurricane Center, he'd look at us like we're totally out of our minds.
Yeah. All right. So now you're the next hurricane was what? Betsy, right? That was you would be 18 at that time.
Hurricane Cleo in 1964.
That's right. 64 Cleo. Yep. Skip one there.
Came across the Caribbean and came to latitude 80. Longitude 80 and went straight north. And we had gusts to 135. It was a small hurricane. I remember Gordon Dunn repeatedly saying it's going to pass 13 miles abeam of Miami. And right around 6 o'clock, it took a jog to the left, and they said, it's in Biscayne Bay. And again, another night hurricane, but that was nasty.
Now, when did you start actually getting an interest to go out and with a camera and start filming?
Well, there's two questions there. Interest chasing and interest with a camera. Video cameras cost $50,000 to $80,000 up till 1983. You couldn't buy a home video camera. The only video camera were professionals, and the cheap ones were $50,000. So
wow,
you could take a Super 8 camera and change film every 3 minutes.
Right.
And I know Jim Leonard has a few old shots from Allen in that. But as far as chasing, it was when I was in Florida State University in Betsy. First hit Miami, and that was my first week of school, and I didn't even think about going to Miami. How can you not go to class? I didn't realize once I got older in college you can miss a few classes here and there. But to me, the first week of school, I can't miss class. But then it went towards New Orleans. But I didn't chase that one, but my roommate Terry Nixon, who I chased with for many years after that, went with Joe Golden, who became in the hierarchy of the Weather Service, and a guy named Jim Woodley, one other student. He says, I'm chasing a hurricane. I said, you got any room? No, there's no more room in the car. So they chased Betsy, but there was no interstate highway back then. And he came back and said a big tree fell across the road in Mississippi, and the only way we could keep going, and the winds were already gusting like 90, was to go 60 miles out of the way. And one of the guys in the car was panicking, and they just turned around. But the next year, Hurricane Inez came across the Caribbean in early October. And it was a super hurricane at one time, which was, they didn't have the category system. There was minimal, minor, major, and extreme. There were 4.
Okay.
And it was a super hurricane, 150 in the Caribbean. It wiped out the town, one of them, Cape Haitian down there in Haiti, and it lost strength. It came to the Bahamas, stalled. So we flew down from Tallahassee to Miami, and eventually it came through with like 90-mile-an-hour winds and intensified again later. So that was my first actual chase. It was Inez in 1960.
Okay, so now you were attending Florida State University at that time?
Yeah.
And that's where you met these other chasers, weather enthusiasts. Were you studying weather there, or
those
what?
other ones that chased were just grad students, and they chased that one hurricane. I don't even know if they ever chased another one. They just, because it was nearby, they went and chased it.
Okay.
Joe Golden has done a lot of filming of water spouts. He did his doctoral on water spouts, and he flew around in an airplane in the Keys for years, and a lot of the good water spout footage is his. Terry Nixon, my roommate in college, now we chased until 1989 together.
Okay.
After that, we chased many hurricanes together.
Okay, now how did you meet Jim Leonard?
Hurricane Carmen, what year was that? 75, I think. I've got they're all blending together. I was coming back from Hurricane Carmen from Louisiana, and the guy driving the car was a Met student from Florida State. It happened to happen during the summer, so I actually met that guy at the Hurricane Center, and I went with him and a couple other people. And we were driving back from Carmen, and we were in a rest area, and he said, "Oh, there's Jim Leonard." And that's when I met Jim Leonard. He was coming back from Carmen as well.
So had you heard of Jim Leonard before you
No.
met Jim Leonard?
No.
So when he said, there's Jim Leonard, did you know, you didn't know who he was, or?
No.
And so you kind of, I guess you guys hit it off. You had some things in common, and
we chased a few hurricanes together after that, and basically since that we worked together making these videos, and we realized that chasing together limits us in two ways. One, we don't have the same angle with the camera. So
right.
If it goes separately, one of us usually gets to the exact right spot and the other one doesn't. So we have like a trophy we pass back and forth.
Right, there you go, yep.
But actually, again, the filming, and I forgot to answer that part of your question. The video camera or consumer camera didn't come out till 1983. So it was just for fun. I mean, it had nothing to do with filming them. It was just the experience until 84.
Well, you could still snap pictures with a camera, right?
We took our still cameras with us. Usually you're too busy to film. It's having too much fun. They'll just film damage, usually.
Yeah. All right, so now, we're in the mid-'70s. You met Jim Leonard, and then, 79 David was the next one. Were you around for David, or did you guys?
Both Jim and me lived in Miami. Him in North Miami, me down in South. And as you remember, it was a major hurricane, super hurricane, when it hit Haiti also.
In the Dominican Republic, there's 1,500 people. Yep.
And it weakened considerably, although on satellite it constantly looked great. No perfect eye, but the organization was great. And they kept forecasting that storm to intensify, but it just stayed the same. It was a minimal hurricane. I stayed in Miami. Jim went north to Fort Pierce, and I think saw winds of about 80 or 75.
Right.
The couple weeks later, in fact, right behind it on the map, when David was just off of Miami, Frederick was in the Caribbean, in the eastern Caribbean. He had its head chopped off by David's outflow, as often happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then once David took off to the north, Frederick intensified, and we went into the Gulf. And Jim and I took an airplane to, I think, New Orleans, and we pulled into Mobile, Alabama. The winds are already gusting over hurricane force. It's already nighttime, and I remember we're sitting at a traffic light. Why you sit at a traffic light in a hurricane? That's another question. There's no traffic, and a half of a gas station just rolled across the intersection in a gust of about 85 or 90 miles an hour. So it was good we sat at that light. So obey your traffic signals, folks. Wow, that was something. It's good we didn't move. So.
Now, do you have any video on Frederick on your video clip site here?
Still no video cameras. Another 5 years.
Okay.
Till the video camera came out. But we eventually ended up at a school, and the winds were gusting over 80 by the time we got there. And I learned something during that storm early on, from running from the car to the front of the school, which was a shelter. 85-mile-an-hour winds will knock a pretty stout man off his feet. I mean, I was holding onto the fence of the school, and boom, I'm on my butt from a gust of wind, and it was about 85. there were a couple of really interesting things I remember about that storm. We were out front of the school. The school was full of, evacuees. And there were about 5 or 6 older men, about my age now, I guess, out front. And every time the winds gusted to 120, 130, it was like a prayer meeting. It was like, talk to me, Frederick. Talk to me, Frederick. Come wind, come rain.
Yeah.
There was these ventilator fans on the top of schools or other big buildings, about 6 feet around. Every once in a while, one of those would fly off into a distance, looked like a flying saucer, moving about 110. And across the street was a warehouse, and the whole side panels were sheet metal, maybe 30 feet high and 100 feet long. The whole panel was swinging up to like 60 degrees back, making this creaking sound. The winds gusted to 135 in that storm, and that was powerful, and you could feel the power.
So that must have been the hurricane that really got you psyched up for chasing hurricanes, I would assume, right? That was the one that really got you going.
It was exciting. Although Donna was exciting and Cleo was exciting, but as far as chasing them and realizing that you could get into them going elsewhere, Frederick really set the adrenaline flowing. And also made me realize how dangerous it can be.
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about coming up here a little bit, is the danger in storm chasing. But so then this leads into let's see. We went through the early '80s. There really wasn't much of anything to talk. I mean, you had Hurricane Allen, and in 1980 come across the Caribbean, a major, got up to Category 5, and by the way, this map over here, I don't know if I showed you that when you came in here. The red are all the landfalling Category 5s in history. Only Category 5s. Right. Yeah, we have Andrew 35 and the Camille up there, and then that's it. And the 47 almost here is a Cat 5 weekends right before it got to Palm Beach, and then of course you got the Central Caribbean hit by numerous Cat 5s, the Bahamas. Can't show you that on the camera shot. We're here pointing off screen here, but it is rare to see Category 5s. But you had a pretty powerful hurricane in '85, Kate. Now this was a late season storm, November, developed north of Puerto Rico, and then took the southerly. That time, usually in November, you'd think, there's no hurricane that's going to come across through the Florida Straits and into the Gulf, but this thing did that. Tell us your thoughts on Kate. And this is where your first filmed stuff, right? Or is it a little later?
Well, I started filming in '84 with Diana.
Okay, and Diana.
Kate had already been in the eyes of 3 hurricanes that year: Gloria on Cape Hatteras at Nag's Head, and Elena earlier, and that's Labor Day, and Danny in the Abbeville area, which was just about a 90-mile-an-hour storm. In fact, I drove back and forth trying to find a wind through the eye back then. We didn't see too much in that one. It had been an eventful year, but here comes Kate in November 20th, actually. I was in Biloxi marketing the video of Elena there, and Kate actually had 125-mile-an-hour sustained west of Key West here in November. Now coming north, and it made landfall at Mexico Beach, which is just west of Panama City, east of Panama City. I chased this with Terry Nixon, not together. He had a truck, with the anemometer. I think I was the first person that had an anemometer on his truck of any storm chaser.
Right.
He built this thick plexiglass shield he put across the back of his truck, and he always parked his truck with the back to the wind. We were sitting at Cape San Blas at the state park, right at the water. We'd already seen gusts 75 or 80 miles an hour. Now the water temperature was only about 70 up there at the time, so the storm had weakened. It wasn't 125, it was about a 95-mile-an-hour sustained storm.
Right.
I was sitting there with Terry, and I said, it looks like the eye's going to hit west of here. He says, well, I'm going to stay here. I want to measure the highest winds in the northeast quadrant. Well, the way I look at it, if I get in the eye, I get 2 chances to see the strongest wind. So we have a little different philosophy of chasing there. So I left, headed west, went to Mexico Beach. I got in the eye, gust to about 90, a nice little hurricane, teenage hurricane. And I guess filming in that, I guess the most spectacular thing I filmed was the sun setting in the eye of the hurricane. The eye was lit up.
Now, is that the one where you're dancing on a looks like a patio, a porch of some sort? You're like you have the sun.
That's Isabel.
That was Isabel. Okay.
Isabel, not too long ago.
All right. Okay. I thought that
jig you're talking about.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. We'll get to that later. But
back to Kate.
Yeah.
So I left Terry. I got in the eye, and I don't hear from him for 2 days. I call and call and call, and there's no cell phones. You call home. And it's 1985. I finally hear from him. And Terry, I don't know if you've got this shot here.
Yep, I do. Actually, let me put that up.
Terry stayed near that water, and we'd been warned 3 times by the police, get the heck out of here, the water's going to come up here and get you. Well, I left. He stayed, and as he got back on the main road, I was up a dirt road in the park, and he's about half a mile up the main road, headed back to US 98, and the water was maybe 6 inches, 8 inches over the road, but he has a pickup with a 1 foot clearance. But the road was being undermined at the time. Now, the pavement was there when he got there, but the weight of his truck and the 1,000 pounds of ballast he puts in the back of the truck so it doesn't fishtail just went right through the road. Now, the picture you see here, the water was about 6-8 inches higher at the time he went through there. So the water filled up in his cab. And the winds are blowing, gusting to 85, 90 miles an hour, and it's pitch black outside. So he had to abandon the cab, and he spent the night in the bed, which was above the water, barely,
right,
wrapped up in his raincoat, in a hurricane, in pitch black darkness, and somebody came by about 10 o'clock the next morning in the road and pulled him out of there. He said he heard wolves out in the woods. It might have just been dogs, but he said I was really
now was
nervous.
this was during the height of the storm?
This was during the height of the surge was coming in. He was
oh my
getting
God!
off the park at the end where it was coming in, and the winds. And there he measured winds of about close to 100. So right as he was leaving, the park was like maybe a mile behind that truck, and to the left was a road into the actual park itself, the campground. But as he's leaving, the truck is facing north, and US 98 is up towards us another mile or 2. That's where he fell through the road.
Wow.
And he just bought another truck.
Did he have a seatbelt on when that happened, or
I didn't ask him, but I bet he did. Terry was a cautious type of guy.
Right.
As you can see.
Yeah, I'm glad he didn't get hurt. That could have been. Looks like a big drop off there.
There, people don't realize if you're a new chaser out here, there's things you don't see, and the road was there, but the weight of the bed was already being undermined because the water was flowing from the left. It had undermined the road, and the weight of that truck put him right through the highway.
I know. Another thing I wanted to talk about with Hurricane Kate, and this was before you had the ability. Today we're going to get into this a little bit later, but the technology today is so easy for guys to know where the eye of the storm is and and your guys are basically running blind here, right? I mean, you have to listen to the radio and whatever. That was about it, right?
Before computers and radar in the car, which was just the early 2003 or something like that, I would go after the hurricane. Now, what do you have for information? The local TV station, so you carry a little TV with you, and hopefully you're within range of the city. And the weather radio. Now, here's a pet peeve of mine. I've told every hurricane director about this for years, and nothing was ever done about it. Excuse me, I've listened to the dog bark in the background.
This Bonzo's got to be on every show.
You get to the area where the storm's about to hit. You turn on your weather radio at 11 or 5 o'clock to hear the next position, because that's the only information you have. And a hurricane doesn't come in like this. It comes in like this. You know,
Right.
The eye wobbles. It changes
Right.
shape. It contracts. It expands. It makes contact with land, so it comes in on. It wobbles and stalls.
Mm-hmm.
The weather radio, instead of having the advisory, almost every time when a hurricane hits, the local people are so burdened with extra products that they've got, flood warnings, tornado watches, high wind warnings. This is 10 extra products they put out. They always seem to forget to put on the last advisory. So you'd never get the position. You'd have to, if you could get to a phone booth that was working, you'd call somebody. It was on
Crazy.
standby. But really, when it got right down to the last couple hours, you look at the cloud motion. You know within maybe 30 miles where that eye is going to come in, but you want it, that core, the strongest winds might only be 5 to 15 miles across.
Mm.
So if you're not in that, you might get 80-mile-an-hour winds, and that's
Right.
usually the way it is. So you got to pinpoint that by looking at the cloud motions. And the old rule where you look, the clouds are going, the wind's in your face, put your hand to the right, and that's where the center is. But you have to adjust that. If the storm is intensifying, the winds are actually cutting into the center. So you got to adjust that by 10 to 15 or 30 degrees. And if it's weakening, it's the other way around. So
some skill involved, actually. You didn't have anything to look at. You were using your instincts to and the weather above your head to figure out where you needed to go.
I'd like to think that, yeah.
Basically a crapshoot trying to get in there. Just it's got to be tough because you're really running literally blind. You're not seeing any satellite, no radar, no nothing. You're just kind of following the direction of the wind, and you know what city you need to be in, pretty much. But they change direction while you're in your car.
That's true, and like I said, it's the vector of the wind, and all I could do is use the adjustment of whether it's weakening or strengthening, and adjust that 90 degrees either back to 70 to 110 of where that eye is. And then you also have seen the forecast, and if it's forecast to start curving northeast, whether you believe the forecast or you don't.
Wow. All right, so you had Kate. You guys couldn't communicate with each other at all until afterwards, and then you know.
He was okay. Had a bad cold.
Wow.
But he was okay.
Wow. Now, all right. So then you had what was your next storm that you filmed?
I would say a decent one. There was a few tropical storms from 86 and 7, Bonnie.
No, we had Dennis. Oh, that was 81 down here. That was 81, Dennis.
Yeah, I remember that was 19 inches of rain that night. I was driving a taxi cab. Made a lot of money that night. Until I ran over that pole. But there was Bonnie that hit Texas, Sabine Pass, in 86. Now, it was just a 90-mile-an-hour storm, and it was tiny. It was one of those storms that forms from a cold low, which is rare. It came across Florida, built down to the surface. But one thing I learned in that storm, it doesn't take a major hurricane that can possibly kill you, namely drown, which is, as you know, 90% of deaths in hurricanes are from drowning. Right. It was nighttime. I was in Sabine, Texas, and I don't take chances at night. Not that you should in the daytime. At nights you can't see anything. It's no fun anyway.
Right.
As soon as the daylight, and it was already past me, I took a ride out High Island Road. Now, I don't think this road exists after that date. But I drove out High Island Road. Now the wind is now coming onshore. It had been offshore before that. The eye is inland a little bit. And as I'm getting out this barren road at the High Island State Park there, the water's coming up. It crosses the road. The road only changes level by a foot or two at the most. It's 4 feet above sea level, and the surge is forecast for 4 to 5 feet. And I get all the way past almost to High Island, and now the water's flowing across the road. There's junk all over the road. Now, where's it coming from in the middle of nowhere? Well, the oil rig's offshore. There was a stove on the road. There was piping on the road. Just all kinds of junk.
Crazy.
And I turn back around, and I go 2 miles, and the water's now over the road to my east. And so it kept coming. I kept going back and forth, and the water was coming up on both sides. I found a spot that maybe was a foot higher, and it came within 6 inches of the car. And I fell asleep after the winds went down and woke up with 2 flat tires from all that junk on the road. So here it was, another foot. To the left of me was a bay, and to the right of me was the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
So I'd have been floating away.
Right.
Just luck in that case.
Yeah.
It didn't come up another foot.
It
was high tide, I'd have been in bad luck.
Yeah, it's again with the technology today, you kind of know what's coming, but back then, I guess you're still running a little bit blind there, and you don't know how bad it's going to actually be when you're there. You could have some surprises from the local geographic area. You don't know what's going to hit you, and that of course that applies to today's chasers. Even with the technology, you don't know when you get in a local geographic area what can happen when you have 2 bodies of water close together and how they can intersect. Like look at Biloxi, Mississippi, and Katrina, how everything combined together. The storm surge came from all the directions, and everything was underwater around there.
The surge was forecast at 25 to 28 feet, which is absurd, and it was actually peaked at 32, if I recall,
right,
in Waveland. I've never seen anybody die or really get hurt in a hurricane, and maybe if I did, I might not enjoy it as much. I'd somehow separate the actual misery that takes place. I guess those chasers have to do that. I try to give talks on hurricane preparation and so on. And I know years ago when tidal surge footage was extremely rare, Billy Wagner, who I'm sure you know, he just was so happy to get footage of the surge that we were taking out there so he could say, this is what really happened.
Right.
I've told you about this before, but this is what can happen.
Right.
I tell you to leave, you leave. If you don't, you're going to get
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. There really is a lot of good information that can be gathered by storm chasers. I mean, even to this day, it kind of bothers me a little bit when the National Hurricane Center kind of ignores the data that comes in from some of the storm chasers out there. That you report, okay, I had a gust of 90, or the surge is up to 6 feet, and you don't know if it's getting the proper channels, and they're going to report it on their reports at the Hurricane Center. But that information is valuable, especially live video from the areas, even the aftermath video like you've taken, where not aftermath video, but video that you've taken during the hurricane, and then they were able to use it afterwards to show people this is what's going to happen. That's the value of storm chasing, even though it's people at the Hurricane Center in the weather business don't really endorse it. They don't like people chasing hurricanes. They discourage it.
Neil Frank, Bob Sheets, once in a while, somebody would do a TV interview, and they said, you're going to encourage crazy people to do this. I'm trying to get people to leave. I'm like the Pied Piper, getting people to leave the area, and you're going to make it look like fun. It's going to be, counterproductive. So I know every time I would do an interview, I'd always make it a point. Talk about the dangers,
right,
how risky it is. But they did make some use of it. In 1985, the Army Corps of Engineers had a project called the Land Water Interface Program. They and the University of Texas Tech, Clemson, they do surveys to see how high the water was. And you can use high water marks, but it's always like an estimate.
Right.
And then they feed this into the storm surge slush models to perfect that. And the Army actually hired me for 6 years until the budget ran out of that project to film the surge.
Really?
And
okay.
So they were making use, and it was Brian Jarvinen, the head of the Storm Surge Project,
that
connected me. And he's worked at the Hurricane Center building that slush model for several decades. So in the background, but as far as the public, it was always the directors just didn't want to say, they wanted to discourage the publicity of storm chasers because it will attract. And I was warned by Neil Frank, I don't want this stuff getting out that you're out there doing this because it's going to encourage people.
Right.
And you know what? I mean, I didn't like it then, but in these days, there's a few out there that just don't realize how dangerous they say.
Right.
1, category 1, 2, 5 is just a little bit bigger of a number. But I think we've probably talked about this. The force that the wind exerts on objects almost doubles, or more than doubles, every 10 miles an hour.
Right.
So 110 mile an hour wind is creating 4 times as much force on objects than a 90-mile-an-hour wind is.
Yeah, and now let me ask you this: with all your vast experience in all these different hurricanes, what are the chances you think of somebody getting killed out there chasing a hurricane? I mean, you think that it's going to end up happening someday where somebody's going to get caught in a surge, or they're going to have a roof coming down on them, or I mean, I've seen some pretty close calls in some of these videos, and we see recently we had a Katrina video with Mike Dice in the building with the car slamming into the building and the water rising up, and then we have the guy that was in one of the Mexican storms where the roof came down on top of him when he was standing right under for protection. He was standing under there, and the roof came down on top of him. What do you say to a young and inspiring storm chaser? Like, what do you tell them? What's the main thing to look out for when you're chasing?
Well, the first thing is it's a tidal surge. I mean, 90% of deaths are by drowning. You've got to know the elevation of where you're going. If the potential surge is 10 feet, you don't want to be somewhere that's less than 13 feet. You got to give a little bit of margin of error there above sea level. The surge can be higher than they forecast, and you might not find the highest spot. I've heard some people say, I'm going to go to Key West. There's a 25-foot place there. Well, everybody in Key West knows about that 25-foot spot. So
they're all going to be going there.
And you come in there the last few hours, everybody in town that lives there is going to be there. You're not going to get on that. Just like all the aprons to the bridges in the Keys are full of cars from residents parking there way ahead of time, because if you park at most of those islands when a major hurricane comes through, you're leaving your car.
Yeah, and that kind of ties in with the next storm that I wanted to talk about with you, Elena. And you kind of took a couple of chances in that storm. I have a couple of shots. In fact, let me put that shot up here, the next shot in the mix here. Actually, it's not the next shot in the mix, but we'll go backwards. Here it is. This is the shot of you and Elena, and you're driving on a road. Tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here.
Okay. Elena was a heck of a chase. You got it. In fact, it told me what the hardest part about chasing is, and that's staying awake. This storm came into the Gulf of Mexico, moving 25 miles an hour. It came over the length of Cuba and actually deepened as it went across the island. That was like against the rules. It went down 9 millibars as it crossed Cuba lengthwise. The eye went straight over the center of the island. The conditions were so good that it intensified. And it came north, and I drove from Miami to Pensacola, where it was supposed to come in like 17 straight hours, and it stalled offshore. And then it drifted east the next day. And then it stalled again just west of Cedar Key.
That was a crazy hurricane.
And it drifted south, did a clockwise loop, and headed back west-northwest. Now, for the second time, the people of Apalachicola had to evacuate for that storm. They evacuated twice. And this picture was taken, this was the causeway to St. George Island. The tide is now 9 feet above sea level. The storm is 35 miles to my south-southwest, moving west-northwest, so it's passed. Now, the causeway itself, the water was maybe right to the causeway, but there was seaweed all over the road, so that told me that the water had been higher. All right, proceed. Now, Terry Nixon in his truck is following me. Later on, he told me he thought we were going straight west. We were going over the bridge towards Apalachicola, but we really weren't. I took a left turn to St. George Island. And
now that's the St. George Island. That's where the Apalachicola is, right? In that area where the in the Florida Panhandle, where it kind of dips south there. There's like a little peninsula there. Okay.
This is just west of there, and this causeway is going south. It's about a 15-mile long causeway with several bridges. They've all been rebuilt since, and they're tall bridges now. But this bridge, as you see, has already collapsed halfway into the bay. The winds are gusting near hurricane force, and I proceeded on. Went over to the island because I was obsessed with getting tidal surge footage on an island, which was extremely rare. And on the way back, actually, and again, the technology was different. The cameras didn't have little screens on them. You had to look through the video. You know,
Right. Yeah, right.
I had my camera mounted on a tripod. I got one eye on the camera, one eye on the road. And coming back across this very bridge on the other side, I'm on the right side of the road because I don't want to break any traffic laws. And I see the last second through that viewfinder that the road wasn't there.
Oh my God.
That. And I swerved to the left lane, and I'm within a second of dropping into that water.
Wow.
I'll never do that.
So that's like a bridge to nowhere, right? That if you went down, if you kept going,
that it's not undermined. How do I know that the weight of my car isn't going to go?
Right.
I did drive over on the grass going up there. You know.
Where did that go? Where was that going? That road right there.
St. George Island.
Okay.
It's another 5 miles up the road.
Is that all on solid land, or is there a bridge up there ahead?
It's a causeway built on landfill.
Huh.
And there was like 2 big bridges, and that's one of them. It rises up higher. And it had already been eaten away on the first half of the hurricane. And like I said, I'll never do that again.
This is in one of your videos, right? This is the.
Yeah. It's in one of my videos. You say, boy, that guy's stupid. I'm looking at it too. It was stupid. But I was like, nobody had ever filmed tidal surge on an island, at least with a color camera.
Right.
And I was obsessed, and I took chances.
Wow.
27 years ago.
Right. So now, if that situation were to arise today, would you still kind of do the same thing there, or would you? Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, you don't really know until you run into the situation. You know, I guess news reports the roads washed out, don't go there. In your case, would you listen to the radio at all when you were doing this, or like the local radio? Were they doing full coverage on the hurricane?
No, there was nobody. There's hardly any radio stations in that area.
Really?
Back then.
Wow.
I just knew with the way the winds were blowing, it just had gone past me, and I knew it from the previous position. It was moving steady 17 right now, so it's not going to bother too much. And I knew it had gone past there because the winds were already southeast. So
okay.
I knew that the winds weren't going to get much higher, but the surge could have come up a little more. But then again, the seaweed was on the road and the water was lower. So as far as getting in the surge, I think the calculation was okay. But look at the road. All
right. Now, in this storm, Elena, where was were you in touch with Jim at all during this, or?
No, I wasn't. Although he ended up in, I passed him on the road. Actually, he was in a hotel in Biloxi. I came in. This is a day and a half later. I drove into Biloxi on. Now there was an Interstate 10, and I drove in and got off the exit ramp, which is just to the east of Keesler Air Force Base, and the wall cloud came in while I was on that exit ramp. I just stopped on the exit ramp and filmed the eye wall coming in. The pine trees were maybe 60 degrees. The big pine trees were leaning 60 feet to the ground. Then the eye came over. I drove to the coast and drove in the eye to Gulfport 8 miles in the eye. And just shot that blue eye right up in the middle of the blue sky.
Now you never had an anemometer on your vehicle, right? You didn't want to be involved in that?
No, I went with Terry all these years, so I knew what the winds were blowing. He had a loudspeaker that wind bar 60.
Really? Is that what you do?
Yeah, that's good for the video. It sounded kind of neat.
Huh.
But, over the years, I experienced a storm. I guessed what the winds were blowing. I had a Terry's anemometer. Then there's damage surveys, and the engineers go in there, and they say what the wind blew.
Right.
I compare what I thought the winds were to the damage, and eventually you get a good feeling for what the winds are blowing. And I think I come within 5 miles an hour these days, and usually I'm a little low.
Right. Now, what about a barometer? Did you bring a barometer with you?
I carry a barometer, so I can tell where the center is.
Let's see, I had this barometer with me in Hurricane George. One of these little marine barometers. This got down to 28.32, I believe, or 28 point. What was it? No, in Pascagoula, Mississippi, as it came in up there. I was up there with Jeff Gammon's a storm chaser, and I had just met him like the year before, and he knocked on my door and said, "Let's go up there." And that was my first experience, with a right near the eye of a hurricane. I mean, other than that, it was just David before that. So that was pretty. But the barometer helped a lot because you could kind of tell, kept dropping. That storm was coming at you. So I think a barometer is a good thing to have.
During Andrew, I watched that barometer go down. And at a point, I said, "Stop going down."
Yeah.
Because it got
All right.
so hairy.
All right, let's get to that. The Hurricane Andrew experience. Now, okay, let me get that image up here because that is pretty dramatic. There, the car's all flipped over. All right, so let's get to the Andrew story. And all right, now you're living in you were in what, Homestead down there? In Perrine, and Hurricane Andrew's coming. Now, you knew this was coming. I mean, you weren't caught by surprise on this. You were watching all the news. I guess, what news station were you watching mostly during Andrew?
I visited the Hurricane Center, living near the Hurricane Center. I go down there and look at the map.
Oh, okay. So you were, all right, let's get to that image. See if, I don't know if this was taken during Andrew or not. This is a shot of, that looks like Max Mayfield in here, and it looks like,
this is the day before. It's Bob Sheets.
That's Bob Sheets, yep.
Foreground. Gil Clark behind him, who was already retired but came down to help out. And Paul Hebert, who's the head of the Weather Service at the time, who, in my estimation, is the best hurricane forecaster of all time. Sorry, man. I mean, you're good too, of course. But Paul Hebert, he seemed to be the ones, the other forecasters, when they want a little advice, they look to Paul.
Okay.
He's been around a long time. And Gil Clark, and also, they're all good.
Is he still around, Paul Hebert?
I haven't been down there for 7 years. He was still, he'd retired. Jim Lachine had taken over. Gil, I know, is in a nursing home now in Corpus Christi.
Oh, that's just, I didn't know that.
With Brian Norcross, with that company they have that works with the
AEM
manager.
Yep.
Bob, I think, lives in the Orlando area. I'm not sure
he
moved there. This scene is when they were actually deciding where to put the warnings up on the West Coast. In the video like that, you can hear them saying, "Well, should we put it here?" That's kind of cutting it close, Max says.
So you spent a lot of time down at the Hurricane Center. What were the main years that you spent a lot of time down there?
1964, I was a senior in high school, and they had a program in the high schools in Dade County where 2 students of each high school went to a lab. It was mostly, almost all except me, went to a biology lab or a medical lab. Instead of going to the 6th period, you left school early. Waved goodbye to everybody. And you spent 6 hours a week in a lab. Now, I was chosen for the program. I said, "Where would you like to go?" I said, "Well, the Hurricane Center would be nice." So whoever was the head of that program called up Jerry Pardue, who was the general manager at the time.
Okay.
And he said, "Yeah, that'd be good. Let us have Richard come up here." And he assigned me to Banner Miller, of all people, who wrote Atlantic Hurricane. So I was excited, and I spent 6 hours a week there during.
Okay, so you were how old now?
That's when I'm 17.
17. That's beautiful. That's great.
Now, so I was like, I knew the place. I worked there, I guess you could say. I worked on research projects with Banner. Then I went to college. But from that year until 2004, until I moved from Miami, living always within 5 minutes of the Hurricane Center, I would go from June till November. I would sit in on their map discussions every day when they're discussing the hurricane amongst each other. It was open to the public, really, but who the heck else would do that except some hurricane nut?
Right.
And I would come down there at 1 in the morning often and sit there with the hurricane forecasters and shoot the breeze and watch them formulate their forecasts. And there's no better way of learning about hurricanes.
And who was the director back then?
Well, first it was Gordon Dunn.
Right.
And then Bob Simpson was a director, and Bob Murphy, and Bob Sheets.
Right.
And Neil Frank, of course, came after Gordon Dunn. He was there for quite a while. and then Max,
and Jerry Gerald,
and Jerry Gerald for a couple of years.
Right.
And,
So
Bob
who-
Burpee for 1 year. He didn't seem to go good there.
Yeah, he didn't-
was a researcher.
Yeah,
He
right.
didn't like being on TV.
Right,
He was
right.
nervous about
So who's your favorite of all time directors down at the Hurricane Center? I have that poll up at Hurricane City every now and then. It's pretty interesting. I think it was Neil Frank was winning that
No,
poll.
it's funny. Neil Frank was the public's favorite. He was. People looked at him and they said he knows what's going to happen. And he was a real militaristic type of person. And in person, he was kind of tough to get along with.
Right.
He didn't like chasers because, like I told you, he figured we're contradicting what he was trying
Right.
to do.
Yep.
But he was a great forecaster. Max. I really respect Max. He's been one of the best. Like I said, the best forecaster, I think, was Paul Aber, who never was the director. And all of the Bob Sheets, they're all good. I mean, they're at the top of the field. Some of them are more hurricane nuts than the next. You know, some are pure technocrats. They know what they're doing and they know how to forecast, but they're not interested in hurricanes like I am.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Bill, he liked to talk about when he was in the Philippines during the war.
Right,
He used to
right,
put on
right.
these big raincoats and fly in the hurricane, and I don't know how they landed. But, so they're all good. They're all
Yeah.
great.
All right. Well, when's the last time you were at the Hurricane Center?
It's probably been 3 or 4 years. When I go down to visit friends or relatives, I'll stop by, say hey.
You just knock on the door and they let you right in there?
Well, it used to be where it was open to the public, but after 2000, 9/11, because it's a government facility, some nut
Right.
might be watching this during a hurricane event
Right.
and say, "I'm going to go kidnap somebody or bring a bomb." So the security has gotten to where
Yeah.
you got to go through several levels of security, and you got to be with somebody the whole time you're in there. So it's not. Nobody else could probably do what I used to do. Just go sit there like a piece of furniture and watch.
Yeah.
the-
I was going to ask you. You think you could go there and film, like if there was a major hurricane heading to Florida, you could go there and film the guys doing their forecasting?
I doubt if I can get this close. I mean, they used to just let me wander around, and sit there in the forecast room. Now there's this glass enclosure for all the news media.
Yeah,
to
it's a
sit
separate
behind.
room, yep.
I could sit
Yep.
there and put my Zoom on, but
Right.
the other ones would probably say, "Why is he allowed to walk around?" And we're not.
Right.
So, and then there's that security. They just can't have people walking around
Right.
without knowing who you are anymore. It's sad, but that's just the way it is.
Now, what do you think about Bill Reed, the new director of the Hurricane
I
Center?
don't know Bill Reed. Seems to be doing a good
Mhm.
job. I can't offer an opinion because I've never met the man. He seems like a nice, friendly. I've heard he's real easy to work with and
Yeah.
easygoing guy.
Yeah,
That's
he's
basically what I know about.
Yeah, he was. We were there. Bill and I were there. To do interviews for the hurricane season kickoff year or two ago. I think it was last hurricane season or whatever. Sit down with him. He's got a lot of interesting stories. I asked him, "How come you don't have a webcam in here so people can see what's going on?" He goes, "Well, we don't want people knowing what we're doing all the time in here." He says, then we have a bunch of cats running around out in the back of the building. They're trying to they're like reproducing like crazy. They're trying to get rid of the cats, and he seemed like pretty like he's more than running a forecasting operation now. It's like you're running a major corporation. You got all these other things to worry about other than forecasting. But all right, now so anyway, we're looking at 1992 in this shot, and now at this, this was when it was heading to the West Coast, right? This shot.
No, this is just it's still approaching South Florida, but
Okay.
they got to put up warnings on the West Coast as well. That's why I mentioned the West Coast.
Okay.
So they're trying to decide how far north they should put these warnings on.
All right, now what's Richard Horodner doing at this point?
Well, I don't know exactly what time this was, but my last visit there before Andrew came in was about 12:30 that morning.
Okay.
Okay, Andrew made landfall around 4 a.m. I'm there with my friend Andy Dressler, and we've chased a few hurricanes also.
Okay, I've heard of him.
And, all right, let's go to Homestead. Now, the surge is forecast to be, 10, about 12 or more feet. And there's nowhere in Homestead that's more than 5 feet above sea level. Where do we go? Well,
Right.
we'll find somewhere. So, and the storm at the time was forecast to come in like North Key Largo or Homestead, with eventually a west-northwest turn, eventually. So we went to Homestead around 1:30 in the morning, and we're looking around for a spot that's a little higher than somewhere else. And the city hall happens to be built on it was built higher purposely. It's landfill in there, and it's about 5 feet higher where the city hall. It's a round building. So we go up, and there's like an indented doorway, and there's 3 or 4 homeless people standing in there, and me and Andy, and we're thinking, boy, it's going to be pitch black here, and it's going to be nasty. I mean, the storm had weakened a tiny bit after it passed Andros. It had gone up from 922 millibars, but as you know, it dropped back again to 922 millibars.
Right.
But still, it was 140 or 45 in the advisory sustained, so we knew this was going to be hairy. I knocked on the door of the city hall, and eventually a policeman came out, and I said, will you let us in the middle of the hurricane if it gets really hairy out here? He says, you guys are nuts. But if I hear you, but I'm going to be through this door in the auditorium, I'm not going to hear you. And we thought about that for a while. He's not going to hear us. Well, we heard an advisory that it had jogged a little north. So as the winds are gusting 70 and gusts, as the spiral bands come through and getting less in between, we head back north up US 1. Past the Cutler Ridge Shopping Center. Well, maybe we should go in there and go up against one of the buildings. But, no, it's pitch black out here. We're not going to see a thing. Turns out that shopping center was a total mess after the storm. Then we passed the Perrine Shopping Center, and that shopping center was, it looked like a bomb hit there afterwards. And we thought about, well, we ended up back at my house, which is just a little bit north of the Perrine Shopping Center and a tiny bit west. And I had one room fortified. It was a rental house. My landlord wouldn't pay for shutters, so I fortified one room, put all the furniture that I own of any value in there. And we stood out in front of the house. So what's happening? What's that sound?
So, I don't know. Keep on going.
Okay. So we stand out in front of the house, me and Andy Dressler and the next door neighbor Bob, the drunk, was over there with us. And the winds are starting to gust now, northeast wind. We're on the south side of the house. And this came on so quick. It was blowing 50 at 3:30, and it was blowing sustained over 100 a half hour later. The big pine tree just snapped next door 10 feet above the ground. Just snap, and thunderous crash to the ground. Now we start seeing the blue and green lightning flashes on the coast, which means that they're not lightning. It's not lightning, as you know. It's
transformers.
The transformers shorten out, which means generally that hurricane winds are now encroaching the coastline. This lightning is flashing on and off. The rain is coming horizontal, as you can see, lit up by the lightning. And then things just start crashing everywhere. I decided to go in the house when the storage shed flew over the house, headed southwest at an ever-increasing altitude at about 120 miles an hour. And both of our cameras quit working. It was, the little do sign that comes on when moisture forms in the camera.
Oh, no. That's
so
like a nightmare.
Film anything. So
oh, no.
There's 4 of us. It was another 2 neighbors came over under a table in the fortified room, well, not fortified, boarded up room,
right
in the middle bedroom on the north side of the house. And the things that were crashing into that house, whole limbs would hit the house and it would vibrate. And then shingles flying through the windows in the other rooms and being embedded in the wall.
Jeez.
It got louder and louder. There was water seeping in everywhere. I was sitting in a puddle. I think that was water. It got so scary. I swear I could have used up a whole case of toilet paper.
Really? Wow.
Watching the barometer, then it got down to 942 millibars, and I kept saying, quit, drop it, if it was getting, I don't like this anymore.
Right.
The house was vibrating. You could hear roofs crashing everywhere, limbs smashing. It finally bottomed out where I was, and we were 2 miles from the northern edge of the eye. It was 20 millibars lower, just 2 millibars, 2 miles away. That's
jeez.
how tight the gradient.
Wow. That was just to your south, right?
There were 4 of us in the house under that table. And it got so loud, it was louder than a Boeing 707 revving up 5 feet away. That's how loud that hurricane was. I try to say something to Andy this far away. I had to scream at the top of my lungs, and he'd say, "What?"
Wow.
It was that loud. It really did sound like a jet was revving up a Boeing something right outside the door. Got the first light. That hellacious storm lasted 45 minutes. For us, and especially so many people. Now, we're chasers. We got in that storm, but there were several 100,000 people that also experienced that storm.
Right,
we weren't unique in any way. There were several 100,000 people that went through.
Let me go back
storm.
a little bit. When did you lose your power? Was it when the 70-mile-an-hour winds got there?
About then, and it flickered. And I remember Andy saying, "We're going to lose power here within 2 minutes," and about a minute later, that was it.
And that was it for good. You never flickered back on?
A couple of weeks.
Did you have any flashlights or anything like that?
We had flashlights.
Okay.
Yeah, we had flashlights.
No radio or anything like that?
The weather radio, but we already knew we were in a hurricane.
Yeah. Yeah.
But early morning, first light, the gusts were down to like 80, 85. I walked out the front door, and I saw those 2 cars upside down. Now, that was 60 feet from where we were. And we did not hear those cars flipping. That's how loud the sounds were.
Jeez.
That hurricane. I mean, that one car went up in the air, came on top of the other. It had to make some noise. Look at the roof there.
Yeah, the gable ends were the big thing in Hurricane Andrew. The wind ripping, pulling those things, and they learned a lot from that. The tall gable ends on houses were weak, and they weren't reinforced. Now, in your house...
A little story I can tell about that, if you'd like.
Sure.
Stanley Wright passed away. He worked at the Hurricane Center and Satellite. Very kind man. I always loved to talk with Stanley. He was a hurricane nut, too. He was from Houston. He talked about Carla all the time. Every year he'd say, "My wife keeps telling me to put up hurricane shutters." He lived in Country Walk. You know Country Walk?
Right.
That was 2 miles to my west-northwest. He never put up his shutters, except this year in June. He said, "I'm putting up shutters." He puts up the shutters on his house, and the shutters stayed intact, but the walls fell down. And his whole house was destroyed during that hurricane, along with just about everybody else.
Okay. So we're going to wait.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Well, I looked out the door in the morning and saw this across the street. And my guess, and I'd never seen winds this high, so my frames of reference weren't very many, if any. And I guess the winds had steady 145 with gusts to 175. Fujita did a study. The actual Mr. Fujita came down and did a study and pinpointed 3 homes on my block with F3 damage, which is, like 151 to 212 or something. So, and actually the Hurricane Center said exactly what I estimated there. There was an anemometer to my east-southeast, about 1.5 miles, registered 212 in gusts, but it was tested by University Engineering, I think Clemson afterwards, and they adjusted it down to 185, and that was 1.5 miles to my east-southeast. So I guess that wind reached me in half a minute.
Wow. Now, what about, did you have these vortexes, now, like you said about Ted Fujita coming down and looking at the situation, did you hear, I talked to people down there that said they heard roaring noises that would come in pulses and things. Did you hear anything like that?
No, I didn't hear anything. I heard that jet was taking off outside the back door. I would like to address that, something you touched on. That's interesting. Now, there has been studies, especially with Andrew, right on the coastline there about the mini vortices where those I-beams were broken and so on. Every time we've chased a hurricane, Jim and Terry and most anybody else has done this for a while, you'll turn on the local radio station. And they'll be talking to local people as the storm's coming in. And somebody will say, "A tornado just hit my barn and took it down," and like they had their own private tornado. And people really think there's all these tornadoes in the eye wall of a hurricane. But the winds in a hurricane are streaky. Gil Clark described it to me. There's streaks of wind. Here's 110, and between it's 80, and there's 120, and there's 80. Right. And a streak of wind knocks your barn down because it's 30 miles an hour stronger than the next one. So the layman thinks he had a tornado, but it's not. That's a hurricane.
Yeah, those when you look at the radar, I guess those little pulses of red around the eye wall that you see circling around really fast, those are probably the gust of wind they're getting that they think is a tornado. But however, I have heard that in some of the more intense hurricanes, when they're flying the hurricane hunters in there, they've seen these vortices inside the eye wall, right around the edge, inside the eye itself, bouncing around in the eye wall. So maybe there is something to that. I don't know. But, I mean, Andrew is a perfect case. You were in it. And, see, I hear different reports. I talked to a woman in Kendall that said, like, every 15 minutes you would hear a train coming by, and it was loud already, like you said, like a jet airplane, but you'd hear that freight train about every 15 minutes. So maybe she was experiencing these tornadoes. I don't know. Or maybe they were just the sound of the straight line winds, like you said, those bursts that come in. I don't know.
Well, I think in most cases, and that sounds like a typical, you're getting the strong gusts between the bands, and it drops off. But there are, as you said, it's been shown by the radar and the recon that those Vinny vortices exist. But there's only one person's ever claimed to have seen a tornado in the eye wall of a hurricane, and it was Hurricane Jerry. And I personally don't believe it. But it could happen. The dynamics generally isn't there for tornadoes, except those mini vortices you're talking about in the most intense storm. And Andrew, I was under the table, and it was pitch black, so I didn't see any of them. I'd try to keep up with them. That's Hurricane Elena. The tidal surge is 10 feet above normal in East Point, Florida. That's me enjoying. That's Hurricane Elena just as the eye wall came in. This is Hurricane Charlie in Fort Myers, Florida. That's the post office roof disappearing. There's another section of the roof in Charlie. This is Hurricane Bertha at Surf City, North Carolina, 1996. Sections of the pier are coming down. The microphone was having problems. There's part of that pier. There was about 17, 18-foot waves during that hurricane. Again, Surf City, North Carolina. That's the front end of the pier during the eye. This is a surfer really enjoying the sight that the pier is down. He didn't like the fishermen. This is Elena driving over that causeway towards St. George Island. This is going towards the island. This is the still picture that Jim showed earlier, approaching the bridge abutment, or the bridge apron. This is the St. George Island. Half the island's covered. This is Hurricane Bonnie at Sabine that I talked about near High Island. This is some of the stuff from the oil rigs. I can't see this. This is a different Hurricane Bonnie. Hurricane Bonnie 1998, I believe, at Wrightsville Beach. There's an alligator. Let's see. This is still Bonnie, and this is back in Elena, and this is going back over the bridge. This is where I almost got killed. This was stupid.
Flight loop from the afternoon of August 30th shows a very well organized hurricane.
People seeing this? Okay. Okay, we got a satellite loop as it approached. Now when we chased this storm, we thought it was going to go east of there, but we took a shot, and by luck it took a jog to the northwest, and we got in the eye wall, but not the eye. That was the center of the eye right there. There's Andy Dressler going out to sample the storm. Exhilarating, he said. This is something you don't do in a hurricane. You bring your baby. This is as the center was still offshore, gusting to about 90. Roof peels back. This is facing, which way was that? West. And, slowly that overhang came down. It was kind of anticlimactic. It pointed the camera at it for 20 minutes. Now here's a reason not to drive around in a hurricane. That board could have gone right through that guy's windshield. Now I'm going to the other side, and this is where the surge is going to come up. The winds gusted here to 110 was my estimate, and the Coast Guard station nearby measured 109.
Right, Richard, in this video here, were you alone chasing
Andy Dressler, you saw him with the camera there. And you're going to see ceiling fall down on the manager walking by in a second, or part of the ceiling. And then the surge is going to come in. Now the surge in this hurricane came in from the west, from the sound, and came over the island. Here it comes.
Richard, on that side, it is deep. It is way deep. I mean...
Okay, I'm testing this other microphone out. Let's see if my voice comes through here.
Yeah, move over there.
We'll play past. Has to play past the microphone here. Here's a couple pieces of the ceiling falling down as these two men walk by who happen to be the manager of the hotel. There's one danger that you don't see here. After the surge went down, there were rattlesnakes and a couple water moccasins walking around on the sidewalk that came in from the mangroves. That's one of the dangers that is not apparent, but there's often poisonous snakes around once the surge goes down. There's Andy. The surge was going down. He's having a good time. Not suggested. Now the road there, it's a drop of 5 feet down to the highway. It's good that guy didn't go out on the road. What's happening, Jim?
Good morning, Vietnam.
Now here's the surge back on the other side. Here's a hurricane departing, and here's what the road looked like after the surge went down. There was, again, 10.2 foot of surge, which was the highest in history. These are two men that I talked to. Their homes were totally inundated by water. They were not in the best of moods. Here's Andy making a phone call, but not really. He's a ham. He's my hurricane ham.
What was your first actual year of being? Would you classify yourself as a chaser?
Microphone. 1966.
1966. So that's over 40 years, 45 years experience chasing hurricanes. Now, let me ask you, the current chase scene that's out there right now. You have all the stuff on the Weather Channel. Oh, speaking of the Weather Channel, we didn't talk about that. You did work at the Weather Channel in what year was that? 82.
Microphone. I worked there their first year, their initial year, and I was there. Me and Jim Leonard actually were their designated hurricane chasers. Of course, there wasn't anything to chase that year, and I worked as a technician, desk forecaster. Personally, I found out that I don't like working in a corporate setting, and left there after 6 months. But I continued to freelance, you could call it, and was under contract at times to film hurricanes, and have provided them footage since.
All right, now with the Weather Channel, that was up in Atlanta?
That was in Atlanta, Marietta, basically, yes.
Now, have you ever read that book, The Improbable Rise of a Media Phenomenon, the book about the Weather Channel?
I have not.
Okay, did you meet any of the players that developed the Weather Channel while you were up there?
Well, I worked there. I mean, John Hope was the most memorable one, of course. Mentioned some names. I'll tell you.
Actually, let me grab the book real quick. Tell me while I'm grabbing the book. Tell anything that interesting happened at the Weather Channel while you were there.
Well, we had a recording machine there because there was only like a few hundred people watching it in the middle of the night, I think, at first. And people could call up and ask questions and record their questions. And that worked for a while until one day you come in, and I'd be the one if I had the morning shift that would listen to the questions and give it to whomever could answer the questions on camera guy. And there was one guy kept calling one of the ladies that was on there, and was making all kinds of comments about what he wanted to do with the forecaster. So they decided to discontinue the recording. That was one strange thing that happened. There was do you have that picture of, can you cue in on that picture of Hurricane Nixon? This picture came off the UPI machine. Now, the UPI machine was how we got our satellite pictures. It was hard copies. It was you didn't get them by computer back then in '82. And this picture comes over. Now, that mass of clouds was a tropical wave, easterly wave, we call them back then. And it came into that shape. And I pulled that off the teletype. And a lot of you out there might not be old enough to remember Richard Nixon, but I gave that to Rick Weaver, I believe was the forecaster, on camera guy. I think that was his last name. And I'd say 50% of people that look at this picture know that's a profile of Richard Nixon. And he came on the air and he said,
"He's got his eyes on Cuba."
Actually, it came to that shape for 2 pictures, then went north and disappeared. I thought that was really, it's not doctored. That's what it looked like. And it's a perfect profile of old Tricky Dick.
Yeah, you can find a lot of interesting stuff on Richard's site. That's canebeard.com, www.canebeard.com. to check out all his videos. In fact, he's got a lot of that stuff for sale on the site, a lot of the video clips you've seen tonight and the stories that you've heard. In fact, recently Richard carefully edited most of his and Jim Leonard's best hurricane footage of their lifetimes and produced a compilation DVD, Notorious Hurricanes from 1985 to 2005. What's your opinion? Oh, by the way, Fred emailed a question here. He wants to know if you ever chased any storms that affected the northeastern states.
No, and it'd be a challenge. I've looked back through all the old records of every track, and they're always going to be paralleling the coast there, just about. So, and all those inlets and sounds along Virginia and New Jersey, you pick one spot and it goes 50 miles up the coast. You might have to go back inland 100 miles to get there. And generally the only ones that have a great intensity are moving 50, 70 miles an hour, or else they lose their intensity over the cold water. I've never been north of Elizabeth City, North Carolina, chasing. I've been to Nags Head and Cape Hatteras too many times. Elizabeth City is a little northwest of there, and I haven't. I did chase the great, what was it, Storm of the Century, 1993. Now, actually, in Miami, the gusts were like 80 just before I caught the plane to Boston, and I drove out. I actually blew down my wooden fence, and I caught the plane, and it was the last plane to land in Boston, and I drove out to a friend's house on Cape Cod at South Dennis through a hellacious snowstorm. A Florida boy driving in a snowstorm at night. It wasn't fun. But that's the closest. I mean, we got gusts of maybe 75, and it was sleeting outside. So, no, I haven't. It'd be an interesting experience. Again, it's really going to be tough to catch it because it's not going to be intense unless it's flying.
It's really going to be tough.
Caller on the line? I think we have a caller on the line. Go ahead, caller.
Hey, Jim, Rich Horodner, how you doing? Tony Mondero.
Hey, Tony!
How are you?
Good. How you doing, Tony? Haven't heard from you for a year or so. How you doing?
Not bad at all, Rich. And let me tell everybody out there, the only hurricane videos that the Harrison Weather Center has to this day is from this man right here, Richard Horodner. Not only is he a great hurricane chaser, but a wonderful friend. I remember times where I wanted T-shirts, caps, and jackets over at the National Hurricane Center, and this guy used to go over there for me through hell and high water to get them for me. So, Rich, at 48 years old, I still remember that, and I have a little 6-year-old girl now, married twice, but I never forgot our friendship. I wanted to tell everybody how wonderful you are, and thank you for the many years of keeping me interested in tropical weather.
It's really good hearing from you, Tony. Yeah, we've been talking to each other via email and on the phone over the years, and I know you're one of the real hurricane nuts, and we certainly have that in common, and I wish you the best of luck with your new family.
Yeah, thank you very much, and yourself and Jim are always welcome to pay us a visit up here in Harrison. I know just a couple of days ago we actually had a white Halloween. First time in my life I've ever recorded snow on or near Halloween. We had 4.3 inches of snow, but neighbors just to the north and west of me had up to 16 inches of snow, and we're still trying to clean up. It's been a hell of a mess just north and west of us, with numerous trees and wires down, millions of dollars worth of damage from that storm, because I equate it like this for people that I know. I said, listen, if you ever want to see what snow would do during the summertime with all the leaves still on the trees, this is what happens. And we have almost 90 to 95% of the leaves still on the trees up there.
You know, it's spectacular, beautiful, but of course it's a disaster seeing the snow on TV with the colored leaves in the background. I'd appreciate it if you'd send me some of the shots you took. You know my email address.
Sure.
I'd like to hear from you. Send me some shots.
Something, Jim. Thanks for having Rich on, because I know you're friends with Jim Leonard, another great chaser out there. But you know, having Rich on now you could say you've done it all. This guy is one hell of a chaser and one hell of a nice guy.
Yeah, you know, it's really strange. We've never met before, and we both live in South Florida. I don't know if Vero is considered. Well, I guess it's considered South Florida, but you know, for a lot of years I've been down here in the hurricanes. I started Hurricane City 10, 11 years ago. We've talked email, back and forth, but we never met in person. It's the first time. It's a pleasure to meet Richard, and I'm well aware of his career. I know all of his videos and seen a lot of his stuff, but you know, I thought it'd be cool to have him on the show because it's been a long time, and
he's a legend. You have a legend sitting next to you.
Yep. Yeah, he is. He is. I mean, he started it all. I mean, it's 80. How many hurricanes now? 80 or something?
This is before hurricane tracking. Those guys with mobile radars. This is before everything. You got the grandfather of hurricane storm chasing right next to you tonight. You have an idol of mine. If it wasn't for him and Hope, and you, Jim, of course, I don't know nothing about hurricanes.
Well, Tony, if you stick around a little longer, watch a little. We're going to talk about the current state of affairs with chasers and everything, and the technology, and that should be interesting. But one question for Tony: did you lose power at your place?
We had one flicker. We're lucky because our power runs underground here at the weather center here in Harrison. So we only have, if it doesn't affect the power station, it doesn't really affect us. So we had a flicker, and that was it. Even the flickers, with many computers, you can still take a little spike or hit here and there. You've never really been here to the Weather Center, Jim, but if you ever were here, you would say, my God, you got just as many, if not more, monitors than the National Hurricane Center. So we have a lot of weather surveillance or situational awareness going on here between weather wires and radars and stuff like that. And I think thanks to all the technology I was able to get through the years, we're able to do a lot of stuff for our local and our county emergency management team.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for people like yourself during the hurricane season, to be honest with you, we'd be lost.
Well, we do appreciate what you do up there. Have you seen his setup? Yeah, he's got quite a, man, what a setup you have. I got to get up there, Tony, and see your setup up there.
Anytime, both of you, and we'll put you up and we'll give you dinner, and we're not too far from Newark International Airport. If you ever, but come during a snowstorm or something. I want to treat you to a blizzard. Or
I got to see something when I'm up there. Definitely, I don't want to come up when it's just 80 degrees and a little breeze here and there. I got to see something.
Right, exactly. Come in the middle of January or February when we're under one of these crazy winter storm watches or blizzard watches.
Yep. All right, Tony. Thanks for calling in tonight.
Thank you, Rich. You have, and both of you have a happy, healthy off season and a great holiday season. As always, Jim, thanks for taking my call.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks.
You too, sir.
Thanks, Tony. All right. Bye now. Yeah, he's great. He listens to the shows and calls in when there's hurricanes hitting anywhere, gives additional information, whatever he's hearing on his radios and everything. And I got these radios here. I monitor the long-range AM stations. I got the ham radio receiver over here, pulling the Hurricane Watch Net. You ever listen to the Hurricane Watch Net, Richard? in between the static. I mean, you don't really hear too much. I mean, occasional call out, but it's, you know, I don't know. I really wish more people would be able to participate in that, you know, because a lot of times you're hearing a one-way conversation and the other person's too far away. You can't really hear the. I remember back in the 90s, early 90s, the rash of hurricanes in Maryland, Luis, and all them in the Caribbean. For whatever reason, that night, after those hurricanes hit, the communications were beautiful. I could listen to them on the old Radio Shack one I had, which was a Dobby to tune it to. This wasn't digital like this one.
Like there were sunspots going on at the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was like being on a phone. Actually, it was like being on a phone conversation with these people. That's how clear it was, because all the communications knocked down, I guess, or I don't know, something in the atmosphere, but the communications were beautiful for Hurricane Luis in Maryland on the Hurricane WatchNet, and the two-way communications between ham radio operators down there. It was like a whole night of just really informative stuff, but I haven't heard anything like that since. I don't know if the atmosphere is just not allowing it or what's going on with ham radio.
Well, maybe the hurricane and the instability in the atmosphere allowed for the radio signal to be greater. I don't know. It's way out of my field. But I know, like, it sounds similar to when there's sunspot activity. You can see TV stations, well, before cable. You can see all kinds of, you'll see a TV station from Ohio pop on your TV sometime because of communication. Signals are bouncing all over the place.
Do you listen to? Do you have a ham radio receiver or anything like that? Do you listen to any of that kind of stuff? Yeah. All right. All right. Now, speaking of technology here, here we are, 2011. We got live streaming mobile storm chasers out there. We've got radar in the car. All the weather data you could possibly need, satellite, enhanced satellite imagery, everything at your fingertips when you're chasing out there. Do you use this technology at all, and what do you think of the technology overall?
I do look at the radar in the car on the computer, and it makes it easier. It does make it a lot easier. You know where the storm is. As I tried to explain earlier, it was a lot of guesswork and trying to use what you thought was meteorological knowledge to figure out where the center was, because you really had no information the last couple of hours. It makes catching that eye easier. Of course, it's as I had a discussion with Max Mayfield once, and you got into this about the news reporter standing out there in a hurricane. He says, well, it makes for good video, but one of these days somebody's going to be decapitated. And it does make catching the hurricane a lot easier. Now, it still takes a lot of skill. You got to be a good driver. The storm's going to change its direction, or the eye's going to wobble the last few minutes, and you might have to, and often have to, drive in gusts over hurricane force for a half hour to 1 hour, and roads that are partially submerged. So it still takes skill, and you have to take chances to catch the storm, but you know where that eye is. You can look at it all the time. So it does make catching a storm a lot easier. And I don't mind it. I'd like to know where it is. It used to take, a lot of effort. Had to find a phone booth that was working. That could take an hour sometime to even get the last position. But that's the state of the art, I guess. And
Do you use iPhone or a smartphone or anything like that?
I'm pretty backwards when I pick up things 5 years after they come out. I don't think the new technology is going to work. So, I'm one of those old fogies that are like that. But the fact that I can see where the eye is, I mean, that was always the biggest obstacle to overcome as far as hurricane chasing. You know where it is. If you get familiar with the roads, you have to know which roads are going to go underwater, because if you take a shot to the coast 5 hours before the eye comes in and it changes direction, that coastal road or that causeway could be underwater and you're stuck out there. So you have to know the elevation of the roads that you're traveling on. And now these days there's curfews being put into effect, and we're talking about 24-hour curfews in the area, the whole area where the warnings are. So you get caught outside before the storm, you can get thrown in jail. And it's getting more difficult for that reason because of these 24-hour curfew. It used to be there was just Terry and Jim and me and maybe 80 news crews chasing hurricanes. That's always been the case. Well, let's take that question.
Caller?
Oh,
Yes.
Go ahead. What's your question?
well, I was going to talk to Rich, tell him that Crucy is watching in Alabama.
Hey, Ron Creel. This is an old college buddy of mine who worked on the moon rover to help develop it back during the Apollo days. This is Ron Creel from Huntsville, Alabama. So what's new, Ron?
Oh, it's just I saw your email, and it's great to listen to you talk about Terry Nixon and old times back up there in Tallahassee. Do you remember H.D. Bagley when he reacted to that hurricane? Was it Hurricane Alma?
I was back in Miami at the time, so tell me the story.
Oh, HD, he was the announcer there on the CBS station. We only had one TV station.
Channel 4.
Yeah. Well, this
No, 13. We had Channel 13. That's right.
Yeah. And HD that night, the hurricane came in, and he kind of lost it, I think.
We lost your audio, Ron. You said H. Bagley kind of lost it. I lost your... Go ahead from there.
I was very excited there about a hurricane coming in. As I remember, it's called Alma. Came in up to the northwest.
That was 1966. I remember I was in Miami when it went by the Keys and saw a little funnel cloud come out of that one.
Right. Well, it's great talking to you. I'll let you go here, but I just want to say hello, and I really enjoyed being your friend. We're still friends. I'll see you again someday.
One of these days. You still in Huntsville, right?
Yes, sir. Yep. Still here, still working back for the government, and about 3 or 4 more years, and I should be able to retire.
Well, that's good. We're all getting old, aren't we? Nice hearing from you, Ron.
Yep. Talk to you later.
All right. That's good to hear from an old friend. All right. Well, it's interesting he's watching the show tonight. We always love to hear from new people that are watching these shows. By the way, the email and the phone number is still scrolling across the top of the screen. We're talking about the smartphone. I wanted to show you this. This is called the Weather Tap app, and it shows your GPS position. Actually, there we are. That blue flashing dot right there is our GPS location, and we have the showers coming in off the ocean. But this updates, every time you open it up, it's a new image, and then it starts animating. And great for hurricane chasing, of course. But I guess a lot of the guys, I've seen the guys on the Weather Channel using this. I don't know, folks, if you can see that on the screen. This is the Weather Tap app that allows you to show your GPS position, and then the radar constantly follows you around wherever you are, and it gives a live beacon showing your location. Well, it's not going to show up on the camera, but anyway, that's why I asked you if you use. Yeah, it's about a 20-second delay. It's a slow connection on the internet here tonight. But the question about the chasers today, and the technology and everything, do you ever watch all this stuff? Now, you've been on TV a whole bunch of times, but it seems like now they're caught up in the whole animated behavior of a lot of the chasers. Oh my God, and they're flying all over the place and going crazy. And I think the camera seems to like that, to hold people's interest. I don't know if you've seen this new, the two guys, Justin Drake and the other guy, and who's another guy that they show on there? He's one of the guys that calls into my shows during the hurricane.
Storm Riders, you're talking.
Yeah, Storm Riders. His name is slipping my mind, but he calls into the shows every now and then. What are your opinions on those shows? And also on a kind of a side subject, what other type of shows do you like to watch other than weather stuff? I mean, I'm curious about that too. Like, I love that the Most Dangerous Catch, where they're out there catching the crabs because the high waves and the wind blowing real strong and that kind of stuff. So I like all the science shows on Discovery and Nature and all those kinds of things. What type of stuff you usually like to watch in your spare time?
Well, the first part of the question, most of that's tornado chasers, where the people are going nuts and driving 80 miles an hour through town, and that's mostly tornado chasing that you see, like doing that stuff. That's an angle apparently the public likes. To me, the hurricane is the story. You don't need people doing crazy things out there. I'm a cameraman, I guess, and I like to be behind the camera. To me, the hurricane's the story. That other stuff, there's a certain amount of viewership that likes to watch that. I think it might encourage some goofy people to go chasing tornadoes and hurricanes that really don't know what they're doing. And I think it might eventually end up resulting in people getting hurt or killed because they think it's fun and simple. It is fun, but there's a certain amount of knowledge of the animal you're dealing with. Like a lion tamer would be an analogy. A lion tamer knows certain things that lion's going to do, certain indications, like maybe its hair staining up on the back of its neck before it strikes out. And some of these shows, although it looks like fun chasing that tornado and screaming that I'm going to drive into the core and this and that, it's going to encourage people that don't have the knowledge of the storm and the sequence of events that takes place. Well, they're taking a greater chance. I mean, the tornado chasers and Jim and me chasing hurricanes, we're taking a chance. I think our knowledge of the sequence of events mitigates the risk, but not completely, like that drive over that bridge. Or we'll stand on the lee side of a 3-story brick structure when a hurricane's coming, and the wind doesn't shift around a hurricane like it does in a tornado. It comes from the east for a long time, and then it'll shift to the west later on. But I'm standing on the lee side of a 3-story condo. The air conditioner unit could just roll off the top and hit me on the head. So yes, we can mitigate the danger to some extent. But I think this craziness, it's TV, it's entertainment. But I don't think it's a good idea to be out there willy-nilly just chasing any kind of storm.
What do you think about by the way, that chaser was Jeff Petrowski. I was thinking about that. He's called into quite a few.
He's a good one.
Yeah, he gets up. He called in a lot during the whole Ivan and Dennis 2004. He was right. Yep. He's very good. But what do you think about this TIV situation? The metal car, the armored car that they race into the storms, and now you got Reed Timmer with his own version of it, and now that it's kind of reminds me of the Monitor and the Merrimack. It's kind of interesting, but at the same time, it's like I don't know. Have you seen them penetrate the core of a tornado, or they've always been on the outskirts of the wind?
I haven't watched that show but once or twice, but I believe they have intercepted some minor tornadoes, one or two. If Jim's watching, he might call and have a little more detail on that, or Brad Riley's watching. He always watches the show. Or anybody else that watches Storm Chaser. I think they managed to get in front and into at least an F1 or something like that, or a 2 even. I think they recorded winds of 130 or 50 miles an hour one time. So it mitigates the danger. Now, they don't have landing gear on them, so if it ever gets really and they don't want to get in a 3 or a 4. They say that because they know better. But it could, if you notice good tornado footage, the motion is vertical, even more so than in a swirl. So those things could just get picked straight up, and they don't have landing gear, and it's dangerous. But they're mitigating the danger. You're not gonna get hurt by some flying debris of at least small things. I mean, a whole limb could fall, a whole tree could fall on the vehicle, and it's still going to crush it. But they are, limiting or lessening the danger by being surrounded by bulletproof glass and armored metal and whatever they use, the materials that they use. I know when I'm chasing a hurricane, it's like I'm surrounded by glass in a car, so I generally don't stay out in the wind over 60 miles an hour or so. And I would suggest anybody that does chase a hurricane that sits in the wind and not up against a strong brick structure is not really wise, because I've had 1 or 2 windows broken I had a window broken on my driver's side during Hurricane Gloria. The wind was only blowing 65 miles an hour, but a little piece of metal window frame hit my window and knocked it into about 1,000 pieces of glass on my lap. And I know Jim Leonard's lost at least 3 windows during hurricane. So, and he doesn't drive in winds generally. Once it gets to hurricane force, you don't want to be out in the open. That's just stupid. Now, it's just stupid chasing a hurricane too, I suppose. But not to stay in the open. Now, those TIV and that other Dominator and whatever they call those things, that mitigates the danger of flying debris, smaller stuff, and so on.
Ask you this. When you say that 65 mile an hour broke your window, that's because something hit it, correct? And, all right, now what type of wind do you think a windshield can take in a hurricane? Like if you're let's say you're on the ocean and there's nothing that can hit your window, what kind of wind can a windshield withstand? Now, this is an interesting question, because if I was to get out there and try to film with this iPhone, for example, live on the Ustream channel, and I'm on an open field, is it possible that your windows isn't going to break when the winds get up 150 miles an hour?
Well, how fast do these race cars drive? They have windows in front of them. The building code in Florida for glass panes on a house is 110 miles an hour. But a smallest piece of debris, a little pebble, is going to break the window. The glass itself can withstand, I guess. I don't see why a window can't take 200 miles an hour, that safety glass, but I'm just talking off the top of my head here. But if you have a race car driving 200, he's got a 200 mile an hour wind hitting his windshield.
There's a difference between driving into the wind and the wind driving into you.
Why? It's the same force. Maybe I'm wrong, but you're driving down the road at 75, you put your hand outside, you got a 75 mile an hour wind hitting your hand. It's that much air going by your hand or the windshield in a certain amount of time. So, you're going to increase the force on your windshield by the amount of speed you're driving into the wind. Well, that's true. But you're in a field that I don't understand or know anything about.
I got an email question here. This is from Hannah, and she wants to know. Richard stated the barometric pressure in his apartment during Andrew, but I did not hear him. Would he be so kind as to repeat what the barometric pressure was in the apartment? The microphone was a real problem there for a while.
Yeah, that description of Andrew apparently got lost in the wind, but I was 2 miles from the northern edge of the eye, and my pressure dropped to 942 millibars. Stanley Goldenberg, a Hurricane Center researcher, who you might have seen the stories about, his wife had a baby during the eye of the hurricane. Yeah, his house was halfway in between mine and the eye of the hurricane. He was 1 mile from the edge. He had 932 pressure. I had 942 millibars, 2 miles from the eye, and the center pressure was 922 in a period of 2 miles. A gradient of 20 millibars. So, that's why the winds were gusting near 200 miles an hour.
All right. Bill, I think Bill said he was going to try to call in. He had a couple of questions for you as well. Bill helps me out with the live broadcasting during hurricanes and everything, and he's known of your work and your videos over the years. It is currently 10 o'clock. We're going to wrap up the show here shortly. Again, Richard Horodner, Storm Chaser. We have the DVDs on sale at his website right now from Andrew, Katrina, Wilma, Charlie, Emily, Elena, George, Opal, Hugo, Gilbert, Isabel, Fran, Bertha, Jean, Francis, Gloria, Kate, and Emily. Sure, everybody out there listening has probably been affected by one of these hurricanes, and that's the thing. People like to buy these videos when they've actually been in the storm, but they don't have any of their own video, or maybe they want to add it to the video they already have of their own. But from a professional's perspective of what happened during the storm, it makes it more interesting when they're showing family and friends. This is what really happened right in my neighborhood during the hurricane. So, guys like Richard they rely on the sales of these DVDs to go out and, you know, continue filming hurricanes. I know, Richard, you're not giving this up anytime soon. You're probably going to still keep going. Now, a question for you, though, in regards to chasing in the future. Jim and I have had this discussion before. You know, he wants to go down into the Keys. You know, if there's a Category 4 or 5 hurricane coming, you know, I think the whole chain's going to go underwater for the most part. Are you going to go down there and try to film in a major hurricane down in the Florida Keys, or what's your plan if that happens?
No. Category 1 and maybe 2 at the most, but no. That it's all 3 and 4 feet above sea level. I guess he has good insurance on his car. There's nowhere to park your car. We'll leave that to Jim. Will not go to the Keys in a hurricane, decent hurricane. I went down towards Rita, but I knew it was going south, and that was a Cat 2, or 3 as it got further away. But no, I won't, and I will never chase a Cat 5. Andrew was a mistake. It wasn't a 5 when I thought I was intercepting it. I sent family and friends north immediately when I saw the recon come in with 192 knots the day before. I was in Andrew. I'll never do that again on purpose. Jim says he will. I wish him luck.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm glad I asked that question because there's a contrast in your styles of chasing, and because I've asked them that too. Like, well, we'll find a parking garage that's safe. Well, you know, the winds are when you got shrapnel coming in from all angles, and you know it'll slice all the way through and come out the other end of that parking garage probably. Well, yeah, when they're on a private, they might not let you in there, or a gated community, you know, these condos where they have parking garages. But what about chasing up in the, you know, in your area in Vero up there? You're kind of elevated a little bit, aren't you, as far as being above sea level?
Most of Vero is like 20 to 25 feet above sea level. Even the beach right on A1A there, in most places, it's 15 feet or so, right on the coastal road. There aren't too many direct hits in Vero Beach over time either. It's like 1 chance in 15 of getting a hurricane wind in any given year, which is half what it is in South Florida. The only storm I've been in there was Aaron, and the winds gusted, 85 or 90. There's one little parking garage that's 1 story, 2 stories tall on the beach, but there's no view of anything, so there's no parking garage in Vero Beach to be in. So,
I got another image, one of your images from Hurricane Wilma. I got to pull this up here because this is pretty funny to me because this is right down the road from me, maybe 1/16 of a mile east of here. You could have just drove a couple blocks up and you had a meal and then went back out there and filmed again. We could have kept you warm coffee for you the whole time. But this was from the Regal 18 Cinemas right down the road here, and you were out there. I saw the lights were still on in your video for the most part. You had good lighting there. Is there any reason you chose this location when Hurricane Wilma was coming, or did you just get to a certain point south and go, oh, this is a good shot?
Brad Riley came down from South Carolina and met me at my house, and we started to go towards Naples. And as we were about 2/3 of the way there, it had sped up a little bit, and we calculated landfall would be at night. I don't like a hurricane at night, and you don't get pictures at night. So we just guessed where it would cross the coast and estimated it would lose about 15 miles an hour of intensity. And we came over to Palm Beach where we figured it would come out. It was a big eye storm, if you remember. Yeah. So getting in the eye was not that difficult, and I had radar in the car. And we drove up and down. First we went over to Beachside. We went up and down A1A to look for a spot and couldn't find anywhere looked safe. So we came back over to US 1 and saw that shopping center. And you can go on the west side, you can go on the east side or the south side, and always be on the lee side of the wind. The lights went out, but the lightning was it wasn't lightning again. It was that green and blue and orange flashes were lighting up the sky. And then the storm came in. The worst part was in the daytime. So yes, it was well lit.
And this is like 7:30 in the morning here, and that sign was torn apart. And we got gusts to around 110, few gusts to 110. Got some good video, but we didn't. It came in on the West Coast in the nighttime, so that was the choice. We started over there, but again, I don't choose to be at nighttime in a hurricane. I don't enjoy it at all. And you can't take a picture. You can't see anything. So instead of just having a fascination scientifically and visual stimulation and being scared, all you get at night is being scared.
Right.
So I'll always choose to move down the coast or up the coast to get it in the daytime if I can calculate that properly.
Now, see, now did you did you have instruments to measure that 110 from Wilma, or was that just eyeballing it, or
estimation? That's it. Okay. Gust about 105 or 10 based on pure estimation.
Right. Now I have I don't know if you've seen my tower cam video from Wilma. I was live during that and had the tower cam shooting. Not the current cam I have up there. It's a nice IP cam with a zoom lens and panning and all that. But I have my instruments up there. They're 40 feet up, 35 feet up. It's standard height for an anemometer. And I measured, my high gust was 87. But there was a moment when that eye wall was coming, the back side of that eye where one of the guide wires snapped on the tower and tangled with the cups temporarily. That could have been when there was a gust around 100. But pretty much my sustained winds were right around 80 to 90. It wasn't really gusting up around. I didn't get any triple-digit readings on my anemometer up here, but the neighbors. I look at those Norfolk pine trees, and if they snap, then you've got 100. And a few of ours here, they bent really like they were ready to snap, but they snapped back. And a couple that were snapped in half had measured over 100-mile-an-hour winds right nearby. So I'm using those Norfolk pines as a good barometer for wind speeds, but they were bending like fishing poles the whole time, but they didn't snap. They lost a lot of their limbs, but they didn't snap. And do you just not want to bother with an anemometer, or is it something that you just would rather just eyeball it?
I will add that gust 105 or 10 was for about 5 seconds. That was one time. There's debris flying across the road. Across the shopping center, and then pounding up against the car and the walls, and it was quick. Most of the time, the winds were in the 80 to 90 mile an hour range. And that was one quick gust, and it was maybe 5 minutes before the eye came, and that was the front side. Most of the time, it was 80 to 90. I agree with you there, and it certainly wasn't sustained. I'm trying to think. Brad did have an anemometer with him. Maybe he measured that. But just looking at the video, I would say just that quick gust was a little over 105 miles an hour, but only one.
All right.
We were in an open shopping center, and there was no blockage of the wind for a good distance.
Right, that's true. Although, with that shopping center, though, it's like the west side of the shopping center is kind of blocking the wind a little bit. So, I remember in Hurricane George up there in Mississippi, the winds were so much higher, like 30 feet above your head. It just seemed like a whole different level of winds that was right above our heads compared to what was at ground level. And that's why, I used that tower. I put those instruments up that high so that nothing could block that wind from hitting that tower, except, the tower itself, I guess, the poles that, come down. But I had people tell me, they thought that was a major hurricane. Excuse me, Wilma. That if Wilma was a major hurricane, I just don't see it. It looked like Cat 1 winds for the most part that most people experienced, and yet there was all this damage in South Florida. So you have to ask yourself, what's going to happen when a major hurricane comes into these highly populated areas? And you experienced that with Hurricane Andrew. What would be your advice to anybody in a highly populated area with a major hurricane coming in, strengthening like Andrew was? Would you tell them to get out of Dodge with their family, or would you sell them, just because the Hurricane Center is always telling them, everybody stay put, don't leave, unless you're in an evacuation zone. But I don't know if they've experienced anything like you have with Andrew.
First, with our differing opinions of the wind in Wilma. Well, it could be I estimated wrong in that case, but it also attests to the streakiness of the winds. You might have a few streaks where you do have winds 20 miles an hour higher than the next block. I know I've looked at the damage after hurricanes, and there'll be hundreds of yards where all the trees will be totally stripped of leaves, and the next few hundred yards, they're in the tree snapped, and all the leaves are on the tree. So I would think just the difference there. I got one good gust, but in general, the damage showed 80, 90 miles an hour, and that's it. As far as intensity of Andrew, just like I told everybody and family and friends, when high category 4 or 5, get the heck out of town. Category 5, there's pictures of 5s, after the Labor Day storm and Camille and the Swan Island on Janet. It just lays everything flat. You're talking about F3 tornado damage. Leave town if it's a Cat 5 coming. That only happens once every 40, 50 years maybe, but they don't want the Hurricane Center doesn't want the roads to be clogged from a major metropolitan area. But if you don't have a strong brick structure, and the roof is in good shape, and you don't put shutters on the windows, don't stay there. If you have shutters on the windows, it's a high Cat 3, your roof's in good shape, and you're not in the surge area, and then you're probably safe. Although if it was my mother or my sister, I'd tell them to go somewhere else for vacation.
An interesting story about Wilma. When I was in here doing the hurricane warning show, I had the shutters. I have accordion shutters on all these windows. The windows were all shut. This house is pretty solid, except for the second floor, which is wood frame. But down here is nice and solid. The windows were all shut, shutters shut, and yet a piece of paper on this table blew right off and landed on the floor with everything shut, battened down during Wilma. So I can only imagine when there's a Category 5 or something, even with shutters on your house and the windows closed, the wind will still get into your house and possibly move things around. I mean, that's how powerful the wind is, right?
If you could go to my website there while I'm talking and go to there's the Hurricane Andrew account, go to the link that says down Andrew firsthand account, down about there you are. There's a picture at the bottom, all the way at the bottom of there. There's a picture of what Hurricane Janet did on Swan Island. This was a Cat 5. Look at that. Is that on the screen? Why don't you do that? This was... You don't want to be anywhere in a Cat 5 hurricane. You don't want to be in that area. I mean, palm trees all cut down completely. Now look at that. I mean, there was one blockhouse in that, and I think it's that thing on the left there that's half below the ground. That's all that survived. The account of that in the book Atlantic Hurricanes mentions that there were 5 people from the Weather Service office there, and they all had to run to that blockhouse, and they put their heads underneath a desk, and they prayed for like several hours. And I was traveling around one summer a few years ago, and I was at the Roanoke, Virginia Weather Service office to see what was happening in the tropics. And the man says, "Why do you want to look at the maps?" And I said, "You're welcome, but why do you want to look at the maps?" I said, "I chase hurricanes." He says, "You're out of your mind." And I said, "Why do you say that?" He said, "You read the book Atlantic Hurricanes, that account of Janet? One of the man's name was Brown. Well, I'm Mr. Brown." And he says, "Here it is 40 years later, and I still have nightmares twice a week from what we went through." So that was pretty powerful. And look at that. I mean, it was that whole island. That's all it looked like after that hurricane. Palm trees don't snap, except in the worst of hurricanes. So yes, if a Cat 5 is a high Cat 4, if you have time to batten down and leave town, that's my advice. I'm not the hurricane forecaster, but if it's a high Cat 4, it can become a Cat 5, just like Andrew. So if you can get out of town, do.
Didn't Didn't they find people with skin stripped off their bodies in the 35 hurricane in the Keys? The wind was so powerful it sandblasted their skin off or something like that?
I believe I read that, and a part of the account I remember most was a man that left his house in the eye at night to see what to secure his boat, and he saw the tidal surge, and this was usually the surge is gradual; it doesn't come in as a big wave. But he saw a wave with his flashlight, and it caught him, and he got knocked out and woke up in the morning in the top of a palm tree. So, Cat 5, nothing. It's like F3, F4 tornado. You see tornado damage. It just totally lays things flat.
All right, finally, Richard, what do you ever read any hurricane books? Do you have anything on the shelf that you'd like to read or recommend to anybody?
I'd say the Atlantic Hurricane, if you can get hold of it, it's still my favorite. Bob Sheets' book was a real good one. I forgot the title of that he wrote about 10 years ago.
That book, Atlantic Hurricanes. I mean, when I was in high school, I'd rent that book out. I'd check that book out. It seemed like every month I'd be in there. Well, I'm going to find out about this hurricane or that hurricane. Or I mean, that book was fantastic by Gordon Dunn. I love that book. Yeah, it was the big thick book, right? They had the blue cover with the palm trees on the front and the orange letters on the front of it. Yeah. Yep. All right, now just to let you know, my favorite hurricane book of all time is The Ship in the Storm, Jim Carrier. It's about the Hurricane Mitch story, the Phantom ship that disappeared and they never found that ship again. And they said that the guys on that boat, they dropped off all the passengers and they rowed it out. They were heading down to Rotan in Honduras to supposedly get away from the storm, and Jerry Gerald has nightmares over that because apparently there was a lot of communication problems there, telling them where to go, and they didn't listen, or didn't go where they were supposed to go. Anyway, they should have probably just stayed in Belize where they dropped everybody off. But apparently, a lot of the people that worked on that ship had their wives and family members didn't even know they were on that ship in that storm, and they had nightmares about them dying at sea. So there was some kind of telepathy going on there between family members, and it was they all died. They never found any of those people or the ship or any pieces of the ship. Mitch, they had probably 80-foot waves. I mean, the storm had 180 mile an hour winds. That book is just unbelievable to me because they get into the personal lives of all the guys on that ship and the problems they had between each other and the captain, and the squabbling and the fighting over getting away from the storm. We need to go left and not this way, and there were fights going on from what they heard from the last communications. And Jerry Gerald loves that book too. That's the first thing, and I had him on the show. I had him on a few years back, and it's the first thing he asked me, "Have you ever read that book?" I go, "Yep, that's the best hurricane book I've ever read. It's really dramatic." But well, you could tell. I'll give you the copy there, and you take it for being a guest on the show here. You can go ahead and take a copy of that and read. There's all kinds of pictures in there, but I'd recommend that book to anybody. That's just fantastic. And there's a whole bunch of other, Bob Sheets' book. I got that up there too, and I think it's Hurricane Watch, Bob Sheets. All right, folks, we're going to wrap it up. I thought Bill was going to call. He might be having problems with his phone. But anyway, we're going to wrap it up here. Richard, thank you for coming in to the studio here and sharing your stories of hurricanes. And I'm sure you're going to have more to come up. In fact, we were thinking maybe you'd have some video this year, for the show, but nothing happened this year. I mean, any quick thoughts on what happened this year? I mean, why did we not get anything? We're like 6 years now without a hurricane in Florida. What do you think is going to happen next year? What are your anticipations?
Well, I've always looked at it as pure chance. It's like there were so many storms in 04 and 05 where they hit land just because the ridge built at just the right time, if you want to put it that way. And I can remember so many years when a storm's headed towards land, there's a ridge on the East Coast, and we're ready to see a storm, and a trough drops out of nowhere and grabs it. Yeah. It's just pure chance. You've got X amount of chances a year, and it's where the long wave position just happens to be. Yes, it's now been a record-tying number of years without a major hurricane in the U.S., and like I mentioned, we had all these major hurricanes in 2 years. I guess it's just balancing out. We're bad luck for 2 years as far as the population is concerned. It's been good luck the last 6. And
Wrap up our video shot here before we start.
okay, and this is a woman trying to kill herself during Yugo.
All right. While we have the studio cam going, one more time. Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching in, and we're going to leave you with this video as we wrap it up. Thanks for listening and watching in tonight. And the archive will be available in about 24 hours on the site for archive subscribers. And we'll try to fix up a little bit of the audio problems from the beginning, and if not, we might have to chop that off. But anyway, here's some video. Thank you for watching, and good night, everybody.